What is up, everybody? It's me, Troy, and I'm back again with another Chop It Up video. And today we're going to be talking about Confessions of a Mask. Now, Confessions of a Mask is written by gay Japanese author Yukio Mishima, and I have to say that I absolutely love this book for a number of different reasons. But the first one that I want to go ahead and speak about when it regards to this book is that it's not exactly a book that, you know, it opens the climax, the conclusion. It's not like that. It's a little bit more meditative than that to me. You know, here's this man, he's plotting or giving the reader the plot points of his life as it regards growing up in Japan and being gay and dealing with his sexuality. And I really can't decipher whether this is partially autobiography or just fiction in general, but you know, regardless, as it relates to who the author is and, you know, his own sexuality, I will say that if it was fiction, he stemmed a lot of his material from his actual life. Like that has to be undeniably present in this book. I wrote in my blog, it's a lot more like a diary, although it's not constructed as such. And I mean diary in the sense that you do get that full grasp of who he was from his childhood on into his adulthood. And I really loved it because he went through his school years, not necessarily being bullied, but recognizing, you know, the differences in himself as it regards his peers. You know, they were attracted to women and girls, and him, on the other hand, he wasn't. He was attracted to his peers, and he's really struggled with that. And I think the thing that I like so much about this book, and while everything sort of worked with me, even though I kind of knew as I was reading the book that it wasn't going to be something that had a sound conclusion, was that God help me Jesus, the writing was just so fluid, so lyrical, filled with prose and poetry. I mean, it was a landmine of literary stimulation, so to speak. And I remember I started reading it one morning, and then I left and went out of town, and when I made it back into town, it was raining, and next thing I know, I just cracked open the book and laid across the bed and finished it that rest of that night because I couldn't put it down. But even adding to that, from a psychological standpoint, I find that with a lot of Japanese authors, they somehow have the ability to relate death with sort of not even society, but with current psychological dilemmas that they face. So in this case, the author did relate, you know, his sexuality with death and how it's like dying and that sort of thing. That was very prominent in this book. And like I said, I find that a lot when it comes to Japanese authors. I don't know what it is about death, that sort of slight affinity for death, but it was definitely present here. It wasn't the disturbing kind of death talk, you know, ruminations. It's not so much a book that's plot driven. It's a lot more, like I said, I'm summing this up, it's a lot more meditative. The musings of a gay Japanese man during wartime or pre-war, or moving on into war, I will say, because I think at one point he was starting to get into the military, the Japanese military. Just a really deep, sort of troubling psychological view into what you would probably think would consist of a gay Japanese man during this time and this period, and what he was thinking at the time. You know, the oppositions he faced with being gay and having to sort of live by his customs as it regards to the influence of his parents, his friends, his peers, and even that of another woman that he was trying to find an attraction for, but you know, they both just knew it wasn't gonna work. So I'm gonna read some of my favorite passages from him. I really wish I did more with this book, but after I read this book, I was just done. Like, I was just like, I don't want to talk no more. I just want his next book. One passage is, and yet I was unable to take any great pleasure in this freedom that was allowed me. Like an invalid taking his first step during convalescence, I want to say, I had a feeling of stiffness as though I were acting under the compulsion of some imaginary obligation. I missed my bed of idleness, and in this house it was tactically required that I act like a boy. The reluctant masquerade had begun. At about this time I was beginning to understand vaguely the mechanics of the fact that what people regarded as a pose on my part was actually an expression of my need to assert my true nature. And that it was precisely what people regarded as my true self, which was a masquerade. Oh, great. And so another passage is, when a boy of 14 or 15 discovers that he is more given to introspection and consciousness of self than other boys his age, he easily falls into the error of believing it is because he is more mature than they. This was certainly a mistake in my case. Rather, it was because the other boys had no such need of understanding themselves as I had. Right! Let me stop. Keep going. Listen to this. They could be their natural selves, whereas let me go. Okay. They could be their natural selves, whereas I was to play a part. A fact that would require considerable understanding and study. So it was not my maturity, but my sense of uneasiness, my uncertainty, that was forcing me to gain control over my consciousness. Because such consciousness was simply a stepping stone to aberration. I think I said that right. And my present thinking was nothing but uncertain and haphazard guesswork. I'm telling you, child. And so here's the next one. The sense of failure which that night had aroused in me gradually returned, spreading to every corner of my life. I became depressed. For days on end, I would be unable to turn my hand to anything. The need to prove to myself that I had some sort of potency seemed to become more urgent each day. It seemed that I could not go on living without some such proof. And yet nowhere could I discover a clue to the realization of my inherent perversity. There was no opportunity here for satisfying my abnormal desires, not even in their mildest forms. I'm gonna keep this video short, but I absolutely love this book. I think I gave it 5 stars. Okay, it just took me there. It took me there. But I'm about to go. Bye bye. As always, please leave your comments and questions and any other things that you want to talk about down in the comment section below. I'll see you guys next time.